Good evening, I'm Joel Flynn in Hong Kong. Welcome to View TV News. Coming up on tonight's show. The government confirms controversial plans to rent out part of the West Kowloon terminus to the mainland, allowing officials across the border to enforce national laws there. Chief Executive Carrie Lam says winning support for the high-speed rail won't be plain sailing while brushing off legality concerns. And Donald Trump pleads with Republicans to do the right thing ahead of a key healthcare vote in his bid to roll back Obamacare. It is official, Hong Kong will be leasing out part of the West Kowloon terminus to the mainland for the high-speed rail link. Under the controversial plan, mainland officials will enforce border clearance and national laws in about 1/4 of the area. The so-called mainland port area includes 2 sections of the station, the platform and inside train carriages. The ports will effectively no longer be considered Hong Kong territory. That makes it exempt from the Basic Law, which in normal circumstances prohibits officials from enforcing mainland laws exempt in circumstances involving national matters. The property rights of the site will still belong to Hong Kong. The government will seek the approval from the National People's Congress Standing Committee and table a bill to LegCo. Well, earlier, Chief Executive Carrie Lam stressed that the proposed arrangements for the high-speed rail link are in line with the Basic Law and that there is no compromise for convenience. But she added that winning lawmaker support for the project won't be plain sailing.
Definitely not. This is not a question of choice between convenience to passengers using the high speed and the rule of law in Hong Kong. This is not a choice. We have found a solution and a set of arrangements which will be in full compliance with the principle of one country, 2 systems and provisions in the Basic Law. But it is very important to understand that the issue or the crux of the matter is really to find a means that is legal to support this convenience for the people of Hong Kong. Okay?
Well, despite the government's attempts to allay concerns over legal arrangements for the high-speed rail link, many questions still remain over how it will affect Hong Kongers. Earlier, I spoke to the co-convener of the Progressive Lawyers Group, Kevin Yam, and asked him what his biggest worry was about the decision.
The Basic Law clearly stipulates that mainland laws generally cannot be applied in Hong Kong, that mainland officials, when they're in Hong Kong, have to abide by Hong Kong law. And it's as simple as that, really.
One of the major controversies is obviously about how mainland authorities can enforce criminal laws in certain areas, particularly where the terminus resides in the special administrative region. It is still a mainland train after all. What would be your version of the correct solution to that?
Well, I mean, it's obviously from a logistical perspective, it's not for me to pontificate over that.
But if you were to pontificate, essentially that's what we're trying to get at, though, isn't it? I mean, we need a concrete solution to this, so what would that look like for you?
But in terms of things that legally work, I mean, unfortunately, Articles 18 and 22 of the Basic Law are so clearly worded that you really have to have some mechanism where mainland law enforcement happens on the mainland and not here.
It is what this represents, isn't it? It's not just that this is China's enforcement of mainland law in Hong Kong. It's that this could be the start of enforcement of mainland law elsewhere in Hong Kong. Isn't that what you're concerned about?
Well, I think there are certainly people who are concerned about that, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. I think the main thing is
to be clear, then, are you worried about that?
It's always a possibility, but I think we should always not get too far ahead of ourselves on things like this, and we look at the situation that is before us, and the situation that is before us is very clear, and that it does not conform with the Basic Law.
More than 230 people have died from the flu in Hong Kong during the last 2 months as hospitals struggle to cope with a surge in patients this flu season. Hong Kong University microbiology professor Yuan Kwok Yung said up to 20% of patients are elderly. He urges the government to distribute Tamiflu pills to nursing homes as a preventative measure, adding that the medication is about 90% effective. Miramar Travel has been fined thousands of dollars for misleading customers over fuel surcharges. It's the first time a local travel agency has been found guilty of violating the Trade Descriptions Ordinance. West Kowloon Magistracy ruled that the agency failed to inform its customers of a drop in fuel surcharges by airlines during March to April 2015. The company has been slapped with a $9,000 fine and asked to give $15,000 in compensation to affected customers. The firm's Deputy General Manager, Thomas Chan, was also fined $9,000. A Chinese fighter jet came close to colliding with an American surveillance aircraft over the weekend. This after two Chinese fighter jets intercepted the US aircraft over the East China Sea, a move criticized by Washington. Dan Epstein has more from Beijing.
An American warship was intercepted by two Chinese fighter jets about 80 nautical miles off the east coast of China. One of the two jets came within 300 feet of the American jet, forcing it to change its course in a move which the Pentagon describes as unsafe. But it's not uncommon for these sorts of interceptions to take place, especially within the region that China calls its Air Defense Identification Zone. But America disagrees with this term, saying that these were just international waters. Now, there's definitely been a ramping up of China's PLA activity recently. As we speak, one of their most advanced warships is en route to the Baltic Sea, where it will undergo joint military exercises with Russia's Navy. It's also coming up to the 90th anniversary of the founding of the PLA. Ordinarily, they have a military parade. This time, some type of war games are planned for Inner Mongolia, in which there will be mock Western forces taking on Chinese forces. Of course, both will be Chinese troops, but one of the people in attendance will be Chinese President Xi Jinping.
To the United States now, where Republicans are set to vote on a key motion which could make or break President Donald Trump's health care bill. Trump is pressing senators to do the right thing and rally behind his bid to repeal Obamacare. Speaking on the eve of a vote over whether to open debate on an overhaul of the healthcare law, Trump spoke at length about families who had been hurt by former President Barack Obama's signature healthcare bill. It remains unclear whether Trump can unite Republicans on the issue. The party is divided between moderates concerned over millions losing their insurance and conservatives who want to see more done to reverse Obamacare. It would be a welcome legislative win for Trump, whose 6-month presidency has been dogged by allegations of collusion with Russia during the election campaign.
There is still time to do the right thing. And for Senate Republicans, this is their chance to keep their promise. Over and over again, they said repeal and replace, repeal and replace. But they can now keep their promise.
OK, coming up next, the latest from the world of business. We kick off with some local market action. The HSI once again flirting with the 27,000-point level. Gains in tech and gaming stocks saw the index edge just a fraction higher, closing at 26,852 points. Weakness in energy and industrials sapped some of the positive momentum after coming under profit-taking pressure. Sinopec's slide was the biggest drag on the market after the oil giant reported a 5% decline in half-year crude production. More good news for black gold, though. The price of oil continued to go up in the wake of a more concerted action from oil cartel OPEC. The world's largest producer, Saudi Arabia, said it would decrease its exports from next month, as OPEC said its members needed to act together to decrease supply in order to raise prices. That news followed a warning from the US that suggested shale oil production could be flagging. That has been a major problem for crude suppliers. Brent crude was up to almost $49 a barrel earlier today. A low price has been benefiting China, whose crude imports will be more than 400 million tons this year and likely to grow by double digits next year, according to Sinopec. Google owner Alphabet has reported a 21% rise in quarterly revenue, a big number for the world's second largest company, but behind the headline is a complicated picture. It is a mammoth growth rate for an already mammoth company, but profits were down by 27.7% thanks to a $2.7 billion fine from the EU over moves by Google to prioritize some of its own search results. While that hit the bottom line, the cost of running Google itself also rose 28%. Higher than the growth in revenue itself. Alphabet shares fell 3% at the end of trading on the Nasdaq. The company, though, says it is mainly worried about investing, not margins, which could yet spell good news for investors. OK, now, when it comes to music, chances are you're one of the hundreds of millions across the world who stream their songs. That is, of course, unless you're singing to yourself in the shower. Well, the king of streaming, Spotify, is close to striking a new licensing deal with Warner Music. If it goes ahead, it will be the last big music royalty agreement needed before Spotify pushes ahead with a US stock market listing. Fred Katayama lends us his ears.
Sources say Swedish music streaming service Spotify is close to signing a new licensing deal with Warner Music. The companies are still negotiating revenue split and the size of an upfront payment to the label, but the sources say the deal will likely be signed by September. Earlier this year, Spotify was able to lower its royalties in an agreement with Universal Music Group. More recently, it signed a similar pact with Sony Music. In less than a decade, Spotify has grown into the world's most popular streaming music service. It now has more than 140 million active users, including 53 million paying subscribers, according to media research. It was recently valued at $13 billion. It wants to go public by the beginning of next year. But Spotify faces mounting competition from far bigger internet players such as Apple and Amazon. All of them want a chunk of a very promising market. According to the Recording Industry Association of America, streaming music services were for the first time responsible for more than half of all music industry revenue in the U.S. last year.